Hey guys, Pitmaster here. Welcome to Coach's Corner, and I'm going to talk to you guys about a very, very important skill to have. Take it very seriously. You are a coach, so this does fall into one of your jobs. A lot of people think it's more of the manager, but to me, you have just as much or more say so than a manager because you're closer to your fighters. Okay, picking your fighters' fights, very important skill to have. It can make the difference between a winning fighter and a losing fighter. It can make the difference between a long career and a short career. It's a very important skill to have. And let me give you a quick story of just an old story of mine. Personal experience. I was a fighter. I always looked to my trainers to be taking care of me, looking out for me. And I had a title. I was fighting for a title under my belt, one weight class lower, because I really wanted to win that title. I cut the weight, even though it was a really hard cut. I get on the scale. I made the weight. I looked, the guys, who I was supposed to be fighting, he didn't look like him because the guy I was fighting just looked nothing like this guy. He gets on the scale. I was 168. Yes, it was a long time ago. He was 199. That's 31 pounds difference. The top of this weight class, super middleweight, was 168. So his trainer said, "Oh yeah, your guy fell out. He got hurt last night, so we just threw this guy in, and we brought him in just to make it a non-title fight." 31 pounds difference. So the trainer, my trainer, made a big mistake, and he asked me in front of everybody, which wouldn't have mattered because you're the fighter and you have a lot of pride, and you want to, you'll fight anybody. So he asked me, "Well, it's up to you, John. Do you want to take the fight?" He's the trainer. He's not supposed to ask me that. So I said, yeah. Okay, 31 pounds difference. That would be like Johnny Hendricks fighting John Jones. I mean, huge difference. Ended up being one of the best fights of my life. And it ended up being great. But I'll tell you one thing it did. It made me lose all trust in my coach. I just didn't trust him at all because I knew he wasn't looking out for my best interest. Okay, and as a coach, your fighter needs to trust you. For it to be a successful relationship, your fighter needs to have complete confidence in you. And guess what? You need to look out for your fighter's best interest. Number one, his safety, building him up, helping him along in his career. That's your job. Take it seriously. If you don't take that seriously, do not be a coach. Because these guys are looking up to you. When Chuck Liddell first asked me to train him and said he wanted to fight, I was like, I wasn't really that into it. I didn't want to be a trainer. I didn't want to be involved in fights anymore. But he said, I need you to help me. I think you can get me there, and I trust you. And that was a big deal for me. So I said yes, and he went pretty far, Chuck Liddell, yada, yada. But you need to be trustworthy. You need to look out for your fighter's best interest. That is utmost important. And taking their fights or not is one of your main jobs. Okay? You need to do that. There's a couple little things that you can go while you're doing this to help you make your decision. Number one, if it's a really unexperienced fighter, say less than 5 fights, I'll never fight anyone with over 10 fights. I don't care what the record is. Never. That's one of my rules of thumb. I just won't. Because there's just too much experience there. Another thing I like to do is I don't like to fight guys that are undefeated unless it's a title fight or unless I know something and I've personally watched them fight and know that my guy can beat him. I don't want to take a chance on an undefeated fighter. You know, even if the guys he beat aren't that good, just the fact that he's undefeated, I mean, you just never know. So I just don't want to take that chance on my guy. You know, once he's had a loss or two, more beatable, then I'll look at his record. When you're looking at your fighter's opponent's record, I also look at their opponent's records. So in other words, if my guy lost his last 5 fights, but won all the rest, and the last 5 guys he beat were like Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, you know, stuff like that, then you kind of take that into context. Okay, so you got to realize that. So I look at their opponents, but say they had 5 wins in a row and then 5 losses before that, but their 5 wins were against guys that were like 3-40, you know, with a completely inverse record, you know, and a losing record. Then, you know, I might be more willing to take the fight. So I look at their opponent's record and then their opponent's record. Okay, that's also very important to me. I also like to watch video of my guys, and I'll give you a quick story about that. Dan Henderson called me about getting a fight for Glover Teixeira once, and it was against Sojuku, who was a badass guy and was knocking people out. And he looked unbeatable. And he was built like a, you know, just like a freight train, and everybody was scared to fight him. So first thing that came to my mind was, nah, that's all right. We don't need that fight, you know. So Dan Henderson called me a mother hen and said, you're overprotective of your guys, and I can't believe you won't take a fight because you guys are scared. And I said, yeah, okay, whatever. So I went back and looked at video of this guy, Sojuku, and I got a gut feeling. And just watching him, he was beating people, but he didn't look unbeatable. And I didn't think he was as good as the hype. I got a gut feeling. I called Dan Henderson back and said, we'll take the fight. Glover knocked him out in the first round. Okay? The UFC watched that fight. Dana White was at that fight. It was a WEC fight at the Tachi Palace. Dana got Glover into the UFC because of that fight. So it worked out fine. But I watched video, and then I had a gut feeling. Okay. Now, when you're watching video of your fighter's opponent, take a couple things into consideration. Number 1, don't buy their weaknesses. Don't take a fight on their weaknesses. Like if it looks like they have, you know, terrible takedown defense, and your guy, his only chance or his best chance of winning is takedowns, don't go with that. Because fighters now evolve so quickly from one fight to another. They're getting better and better and better because this is such a new sport, and people are evolving so quickly. So I never take a fight based on weaknesses, or I never map out a strategy on weaknesses I see on my fighters' opponents. Okay? Now, on the other side of that, when there's strengths, I always rely on those strengths, because even when they evolve, they're not going to devolve. They're not going to take away their strengths. They're going to build up their weaknesses. So if I see the guy has a killer left hook, I'm not going to think, oh, he probably doesn't this fight. Realize he will this fight. Or if he has an unbelievable double leg, I'm going to realize he's going to have that in this fight too. So you keep their strengths and plan around them. Don't plan around their weaknesses. Okay? Don't put too much stock in that. All right? So that's another thing I got to say about that. Your relationship with the promoter is very important too. You need to try to build a relationship with the promoter. Now, if you're in the UFC already, this isn't really, for you. You got to be friends with Dana and stuff like that. But the UFC calls all the shots. You don't get to make too many decisions. So, with that said, try to build and nurture relationships with the promoter, but realize that the promoter and the trainer have adversarial relationships, Because he wants fight of the night, you want KO of the night. You don't want your fighter to get into a drag out, bloody brawl. He does. Because, yeah, he might like your fighter, but he wants to see a war every time because then he'll sell more tickets for his next show. The promoter wants great fights. The trainer wants a great fighter. So they're adversarial relationships. Don't ever forget that. Okay, last thing, when you're training your fighters and picking fights, one thing to do, a rule of thumb, is always have your lower end fighters, and I'm not putting down the fighters saying they're low end, but I mean lower level cards, not the UFC. Always have them ready to fight next week. Because you never know when you're going to get that call from Joe Silva from the UFC saying, hey, is your fighter ready to fight next week? You always want to be able to say yes. And if your opponent's fat, out of shape, and he's waiting to get a call from a lower show so he can have 6 weeks to train or 9 weeks to train, if that's the way he is, and he gets that call from the UFC, and you say, of course you're going to say yes, but if he's out of shape and makes a terrible showing, they're never going to call him again. So you want your fighter to always be ready for that call. Because luck is opportunity when it meets preparedness. Okay? Like if you have the opportunity but you're not prepared, you're not going to be very lucky. You're going to be unlucky. But if you get that call and you happen to be prepared, then they're going to call it, whoa, he was lucky. No, he was prepared. So always have your fighter ready to go. I'm not saying keep him at his weight all the time. You might have to fight a weight up because you don't want him training too lean, always on weight. Okay? But you do want him in shape. He's a fighter. This is his job, by the way. Okay, remember that. That's his job, is to be in shape. He's a fighter. Fighters shouldn't walk around fat and out of shape, and then when they get a fight, they start training. They should be training and learning and building and in school all the time. And they just shouldn't be ready to go until they have a fight. And there's a difference between being fight ready and being in shape. You should always be somewhere in the middle of those two. And then that way, within a week's notice, you can be ready to go. All right? I hope that helped. If you have any questions, please comment. Please text me, call me, Twitter me, Facebook me, whatever you want. I'm here for you guys. Thanks for being part of the Pit Ohana, and thanks for being part of it.